Welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today is Keith Smith, along with some of the cast and,
Crew.
And crew, cast and crew of Miracle Worker. Welcome, Keith.
It's always good to be here, Paige.
So, introduce cast and crew that you have with
Okay.
us.
We'll start down on the far end. That's Chris Gibson. We're going to be talking a lot about her and what's coming up with her in the show and outside of the show. But she's been doing shows with me for 10 years and was one of our youth ensemble singers, and it's always been very faithful and reliable, and I'm so glad that she's enriched our artistic endeavors. And beside her is her younger sister, Samantha. And Samantha, though there's no music, in fact, there's silence, and we'll talk about that in this show, Samantha has a beautiful voice, beautiful singing voice. And they're playing the two leads in the show. Chris is Annie Sullivan, and Samantha is Helen Keller.
Awesome.
We'll talk more about that. Then to my immediate right is Miss Maddie Wilson, and she's in the show, but she's stage managing the show, which is a big endeavor, especially with this show. But she's very mature and reliable for her age, and she's also a singer, as is Chris. So we have all singers, even though they're not going to be utilizing that skill in this show. But we're looking forward to, at this point, we're still fairly early in rehearsals at this taping, about 7.5 weeks out. So which we'll need, as you'll see in a few minutes, we'll need that much time. But it's good to have these ladies involved in the show, and I'm proud of all of them and look forward to working with them.
I'm going to start with Chris and Samantha down on the end. Samantha, you're the youngest, so I'm going to ask you, what's it like to work with your big sister in the show?
I think it's really cool, especially because this is Chris's last show, and before she gets married. Well, actually, we'll do the show after she gets married. But we are doing the show, and it's about Helen Keller and, sign language and everything, and that's what she studied when she was in school, and so I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really cool connection. Sam, from your perspective, what's it like to have your sister there? Oh, I just asked you that. I'm sorry. I need to ask Chris. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. No, it's great. I'm excited because this is her first show with Keith in the Hub, and it's special since it's the last one that I get to do for a little while. I'm excited to have her be a part of it and to get to experience something that I love so much. Because I love Hudson. I love the dinner theater. I love being a part of it. So getting to bring her into something that I enjoy for one of the last times that I get to do it is really fun, and it's really exciting. It's a great memory to have.
And we'll let her tell us why she's doing all this stuff and coming back. But I wanted to mention the angle for casting them together. First of all, they're both very talented, and their family has a great work ethic, so I know they're going to come through. But we did make an effort, and Chris was of the same mind as me. We made an effort to contact the North Carolina School for the Deaf and the other deaf community areas, people in this area, and just could not get response. And a lot of that was logistical. Like at the deaf school, the residents there have to have curfew at 8 o'clock each night, so it's very difficult to try to do so. So we went that route first. But then Sam auditioned, and she did a fine job. And then you have the added element that for now, they're still living in the same home, so they have time to work together because it's very tedious and very demanding and very detailed and meticulous what they're doing. And also, Ever being the publicity hound, I know it's a great story to have two sisters. You can promote that, which we're doing right now. So
It is a great story. And Keith, we've talked about it is a meticulous thing. There's a lot of interaction and probably not a lot of dialogue. I'm guessing.
Sam only has one word in the show toward the very end, and she's supposed to have that memorized by next week. But so much action and business. And I will say this in what we've seen so far, and we're still in the early stages, but they're very authentic and believable, especially with Chris's background dealing with the deaf community and her knowledge of sign language. But I told her she can't do her beautifully aesthetic signing in this show for the public because she's pounding this into Helen in her hands. But there's a lot of intensity there. And but everything they've done so far I believed, and that's saying a lot because you see examples of this, people on videos or things, and it just doesn't come across as as real as this is. So,
Sam, did you have something to add? Okay. You just looked like you did, so I wanted to make sure that you, with Keith, you got to jump right in there.
that's right.
You got to jump in there. Maddie, this is your first show as stage manager?
Yes, ma'am.
Why stage manager? What was your interest?
I've always been in plays, and I've always been in the roles and stuff like that. I've never really worked behind the scenes and stuff. And also, it's just a good way to step back and kind of see what it's like from a different perspective. I've enjoyed so far trying to put it together and working with every member of the cast, and not so far focusing more on memorizing my lines. I get to socialize more and see what it's like for them.
Okay.
And the thing about her, she's in that no woman's land. She's too old to do certain children's roles, and she's too young to do adult roles, but she's very talented. But she does have some minor stuff in this show on stage, not even minor, several things. But I trusted her enough. The lady who usually stage manages for us, Bethany Bumgarner-Kirby, very dependable and reliable, but she's unable to do this show. She's helping some, but she can't do it fully. So, I have a lot of trust in Maddie, or I would not offer that. So she's very mature, and she'll do a great job, is doing a great job.
For the non-theater folks, what does stage managing involve?
Stage managing is prop collecting, being the middleman between any cast members and Keith to make sure any conflict dates or anything like that is worked out. So far, I'm just making sure everyone in the cast has what they need to get the show started.
Okay. And this is something I should have started with, because I've done so many shows with Keith and we just jump right into the show. I didn't ask any of you for background. So can you give us a little bit about yourself? We'll start with Maddie.
So with theater, I've done about 7 or 8 plays so far. I've only done one with Keith, but I've had good experiences. And other than that, I'm a high school student and a college student, so I'm working really hard with school. And it's really fun to be able to step away from that and do a play with Keith.
Sam?
Well, I used to do acting when I was like 6 or 8, I believe, and it was really fun. But I did like musical theater, and I did a little bit of ballet, but I didn't do it for very long. I didn't. Especially in the ballet, I didn't love the dancing as much as just like meeting people, and yeah, I did enjoy that. I stopped doing it for a while, but it was fun to do another show.
Tell her what you do now.
Oh, I do barrel racing now, so it's basically just a pattern of 3 barrels in like a clover shape, and you try to get the fastest time, and I'm definitely not as good as most people that are
This
what
may
I
be dumb.
do.
I didn't know this. It's with a horse?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, not just you're not running around.
No, it's
That's great.
Yeah.
She's the brave one.
Yeah.
Me and her and the other sister, she's the brave ones. They're the brave ones, so yeah.
Okay, Chris?
Oh, well, like Keith said, I think I've been doing shows almost 10 years. I started when I was 15 in the Yes Girls chorus that he used to do, and then did my first show with him when I was 16. I don't even know how many I've done. I couldn't tell you if I tried to count.
At least 10 at the hub, yeah.
At least 2. He usually does 2 a year, and I was in each of them in some capacity. I missed maybe 2, I think, in that whole 10-year span. So I love it. I love doing theater. I've done a couple other shows other places, but I always come back to Hudson because the people are great, the experience is good, the shows are great. So you can't beat all those things combined into one.
And you studied?
I did.
Sign language?
I studied, so my degree is an Associates in Applied Science and Interpreter Education. Basically, that's a really long name to say that I did all the book work, and I have some of the practical experience. So I couldn't go out and get licensed per se for like a national license to go out and sign, but I covered all the basics, so if I wanted to go back to school and do that, I could. I have a degree that says, here, she's done this part. She only has to do this little bit left. So, and it was a good experience too. I learned a lot, and I've used it in almost every other job I've done since I finished college. So it's nice. It was a good degree to do.
And again, she signs aesthetically beautifully. I love watching her sign. It's very artistic. Yeah.
And Chris, you also have a tremendous amount going on in your life. Keith keeps talking about it, so I'm going to ask you if you want to share.
Just a little bit, yeah. So Saturday from this taping, so I think it's 5 days technically. I'm getting married, and then I will be gone for 3 weeks. I have 1 week setting up house where we're moving to in South Carolina, and then I have 2 weeks on a cruise in the Caribbean. So yeah, we're cutting it a little close, but it's okay.
It's okay. You've got all that home practice time.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Home practice, and we're setting up video so we can do that the 1 week that I have internet connection in Colombia. Because once you hit past, you're up in the air, I guess. So once you get to the Dominican Republic, we don't have any connection at all for 2 weeks. We're just out. So it was like, listen, I'm really sorry, but I won't be in contact with anyone for 2 weeks. I'm sorry.
Except her husband.
Except for
you
him,
might see him
because
occasionally.
we'll be in the same place.
And the man playing the leading male role in this show, Captain Arthur Keller, is Paul David Kurtz. And he's a minister, an ordained minister, and he's officiating her service this Saturday, so it even has more show ties.
More show ties. You always seem to have a lot of show ties.
I pull them all together, yeah.
You just somehow put them all together.
I've auditioned people in the hallways of Caldwell. I auditioned the janitor at Caldwell Community College one. He and I were the only two left in the building, and I had him to sing and act for me, and he was terrible, bless his heart. So I said, thank you. I'm always looking for people.
This is true. I have learned this over the years as we work together. Keith, I'm going to ask you to talk just a little bit about the show.
Okay. The show is The Miracle Worker. A lot of people remember the original movie, which had Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke, and they both won awards for the movie version and the Broadway version. And then later Patty played the older role, and there have been several versions of this, but that's the one that's known. And the name The Miracle Worker came from, Chris and I were talking about it one night. I went home and looked it up, and Mark Twain made the comment, Helen Keller is a miracle, and Annie Sullivan is the miracle worker. So that's where the name comes from. And Annie Sullivan came to Helen in Alabama in the around 1880s after the Civil War, and Helen was just unmanageable because she had no contact, no way to express herself except just flailing and that sort of thing. And Annie did work a miracle over a several-week period. We really think about it as being years, but it was really over a several-week period. Mm-hmm. And then they became really good friends for life, and were student and mentor, teacher, and were friends. And Annie was legally blind. She could see a little bit, but and Helen, of course, was both blind and deaf. And she's always been one of the people I've been most fascinated with in my whole life, because she had a disease or a medical condition that made her go blind and deaf when she was around 10 months old. Mm-hmm. But she couldn't remember back that far. But people who are born blind and deaf, how do they know what? I've asked Chris this, like, how do they know what yellow is, or what a horse looks like, or, how do you convey those ideas? It's fascinating to me. And Chris talks about you can get some warmth, like for yellow or sun, with patterns in the hand and feeling. But I just cannot imagine having to face that obstacle. I'm amazed and overwhelmed by it. So, but anyway, the show, I should give some logistics for it, and then we'll come back to that. The show runs March the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, 28th, 29th, and 30th. That's the Thursday through Sunday for 2 weeks. And Easter is early this year, and the next day, March 31st, is Easter. Mm-hmm. So we go right up until Easter. And this is a very good story for Easter, I think, a very heartwarming story. But as we said, we're a few weeks out at this point of this taping. Tickets will go on sale on Tuesday, February the 6th, so a week from tomorrow at this point, at 10 a.m. at the Hub. And tickets are $37 for the meal and the show, and $19 for the show only. And we do have, as many people look forward to, Dan'l Boone Inn is catering this show. So the meal starts at 6:30, the show at 7:30. And you can get tickets for that in one of three ways. You can actually call the Hub box office 828-726-8871, or go by the Hub on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Or the most convenient way and easiest way, if you can work with a computer at all, and I've learned how to do it, so if I could do it, anybody can. You go onto the Hudson website or the Hub Station website and follow the link to tix.com, tix.com. It won't be available until that Tuesday, but once you do, you can actually see the tickets in front of you and select your tickets.
Awesome. You also have some sponsors for this show.
We do. We always have been the very philanthropic group, McCrary Modern Furniture. They give so much to this community. The Cancer Center here, Bob gave $6 million to Wake Forest University, his alma mater, but just continually so philanthropic. But they're good to their employees. Their employees invest in the business, and they give us money for every show that we do. Also for this show, usually it's for a musical, but for this show, the Caldwell Arts Council, we're getting a grassroots grant from them, which we're very appreciative of. They support our shows so well, too, and other artistic endeavors. And then I've got to get the name of the company. It's AMD Incorporated. They make things, all kinds of, and their owner is Ron Lale, who's a designing genius and a really nice fella. And he's given us a very substantial donation for this show. So we're appreciative. We couldn't do it without them. We rely on ticket sales, but also on sponsorship. So we want to make sure we recognize all three of those folks or groups.
And I'm going to touch on every Keith interview I've done since I've been here. We talk about the surprises in your show.
And I was going to tell you that I made a little note of it on here.
See, that's what I'm looking at.
As of right now, something may develop if it presents itself, but right now there are no surprises. I just want to do the show well because it can stand on its own so much. I don't have to have somebody come flying in, to say,
no dinosaurs
I'll
walking
go see
across
it.
the
Yeah.
stage at a random.
So as of now, there are not any, but that may materialize. We'll see. But I think the show stands on its own merit in the performance of these ladies, and they help them. I meant to mention also Maddie, as we get closer, she was exactly right about what she's doing now and doing a fine job, and her mom's going to help her. But as it gets closer, she'll actually run things backstage and tell the cast when to go on as we get closer, and people are off book, meaning they're trying to do their lines by memory. They can call for a line, and she'll give that to them. So she'll take notes from me with blocking and things like that. So it's a very multidimensional job, but I know she's up to the task.
Very detail-oriented, that's what I'm hearing. A lot of details to keep up with, while you're also keeping up with school and a lot of other things. So I commend you for that. And I also, the relationship, the sisters taking on the role of Helen Keller and, what did her name just leave me? Annie Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
What drew you to that? I know Keith probably had a little bit of input, but I mean, it just seems like a unique role, and it's a very physical role for both of you. Talk to me a little bit about that, about the physical part.
Do you want me to do it? Sure. So it's a little bit of a misconception, I think, for a lot of people when they see this movie. They think that it's just they're just like, oh, it's just a really physical part. There is a reason for it. Helen, because she had none of that outside influence, went to the most basic instinct that anybody has, but she was brilliant. That was what Annie realized that a lot of people missed, because Helen would do all these things, and you're looking at her going, why is she acting like that? It looks like she's throwing a temper tantrum. When you pay attention, you actually realize she has a reason for doing it. She's trying to communicate something with you. So I was drawn to it just because I have a love of this story. I have a love of the deaf community and always have ever since I was younger. So that pulled me in. I always loved Annie Sullivan. I thought she was a huge inspiration just because I don't have that kind of patience in real life.
Few of us do.
That's the sort of person I look at and I go, I wish I was you, because I don't have that in real life. And Helen's an inspiration because she took literally something most of us would find impossible, and she wrote books. She met presidents. She gave speeches. You know, she was a huge inspiration in her time and today of showing how someone can overcome those obstacles. So that's what drew me to the story to begin with. I've always loved the show. I always thought it would be a great performance if Keith ever had the chance to do it. And when he finally did, I was like, hi, Can I come? I want to do it.
I'll set my marriage aside briefly to come in.
I'll set my, yeah.
Big-
And then she kind of got, I don't want to say roped into it, but she came with me to the first audition because we didn't know who would show up. Like Keith mentioned, we did try and we reached out to a lot of people, and I just didn't know. With any audition, I was like, I don't even know if anybody's going to come. What are we going to do if they don't? So I said, do you want to go? You don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but then if nobody shows up, at least you can try if you want to, if you feel like it. So she came along, and like Keith mentioned, nobody came. So we gave her a shot, and she killed it. And I think she was ready to give something a try, because she's on a break now from all of her adrenaline junkie things, because it's cold a lot of the time. You can't do it then. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to give her something else to try for a little bit while she's on a break from that. So.
And I will go ahead and give away the one surprise we have. She's going to ride barrels on stage.
Oh my gosh.
As a
That's
pre-show.
a small area, and so that's going to be really impressive.
She's not going to do that.
I would worry about your safety. I'm just going
Yes,
to go
me,
ahead
I
and say
would too.
that. Sam, where do you draw inspiration from for this?
Well, just like Chris said, she gave me a book about Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan when I was probably 8, and I loved it. I finished that book in 2 days. I thought it was so, different, because, I would watch movies and things about people who were blind, and they still accomplish things, but nowhere near someone who was blind and deaf basically since birth. And I just thought that, like Chris said, overcoming that was really awesome.
That's good. To show how far we've come, this show was premiered on Broadway in 1959. It's written a few years before that. And there's still a long way to go with our communities, and we'll even talk about that with a role in this show, but William Gibson, the playwright, it's in the very first page of the front of the notes of the script. It said, anyone acquiring rights to present this play must be willing to integrate their audience, because that was a time of segregation. And there are black servants who, after the Civil War, who had been slaves, who remained as servants in the Deep South for households, such as the Kellers, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But to realize that, now no one would even think to say, if you don't let people, black and white people, sit together, you can't do this show. That was a stipulation then, and one that was necessary. And I think that really puts a finger on, on where we come from and how it was then in the 1880s to the 50s and then to now. And I had one Helen Keller quote I wanted to get. She said something that Sam said reminded me. We could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joys in the world. So you have to have some adversity to make things click. The characters, Chris and Sam had talked about their characters. The father of Helen is a man named Captain Arthur Keller, real life, and he was a captain in the Civil War for the South. And they had they weren't like a huge wealthy family, but I think they had owned a few slaves, but that was over. And he came back, and in the household there were both black and white servants, not many of them. And he was used to having this command with his men, and he comes back and he has nobody to command except his family. And here's poor little Helen running around out of control because he doesn't know how to communicate with her. No one does till Annie comes along. And so I think there's a lot to be played, the arc of his character, that frustration, showing how he could even learn to adapt some. And the main servant in the house is a lady named Viney. And so many plays in that era, To Kill a Mockingbird and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, they have black subservient roles, and sometimes they're one-dimensional. And I think we're at a place where we need to get past that. So like Chris had made the very valid point to me early on that, there were white servants too. So we're making Viney a white lady. from the South, who's the servant, for a couple of reasons. It's hard sometimes to find people to play these roles, but also we want to try to get away from that stereotype and get rid of some of that lingo that they use and just make her character there. And actually, Maddie plays her daughter in a few scenes. So I'm glad we're adding that aspect. That's something that's a little different. But it's not a surprise, but it's
Right.
a little different angle. And then Helen's mother, Kate Keller, can be played in real life. She was quite a bit younger than her husband. He was like widowed and remarried, and Southern men like that tended to marry much younger. And depending on how you play Kate, she can be friends with Annie, or she can be a little bit over her, or can be intimidated by her. But Christy Branch is playing that role, and she's one of the finest actresses in this area. So she's younger than Paul David, who's playing the captain, but still older than Chris. But they develop, and I'll let Chris talk to this. She pointed out something which I'd noticed, but I thought was very telling, and she had a good insight about this observation. At the end of the show, Annie has brought Helen out of her world into a much bigger world, and Helen is so appreciative that she tends to gravitate toward Annie, and Kate can't help but think that her baby's being taken away from her. So there's a little bit of tension between them that will play. So there are all these angles of ages. Helen has a half brother named James Keller. He's played by Luke Peruch in the show, and in real life, Annie had a brother named Jimmy who had suffered a tragedy. And so when she comes and hears James or Jimmy's name, that throws something else at her. So there are all these angles of interrelation that if we explore them and play them, it'll go to a deeper level, more depth and nuance than you might see in an average show of this. We're going to try to pull all those to the surface.
A lot of things to do. I have one final question
Sure.
for the ladies with us, but I'm going to ask you, Keith, what have we missed? I'll let you do a wrap-up.
They talked about you might talk about your family in general. You've got a large family. It's like your other sister used to do things with us, Alex, but tell a little bit about your
Sure.
family.
So I am the oldest of 8 kids. She is the 7th of 8 kids. So we do have a large family. There's 3 girls, 5 boys. All of them at some point have done some sort of theater. It may have been small, but they've all tried different areas. My sister Alexis, that he talked about, who is now a night shift paramedic, she did 3 or 4 shows with Keith back when we both first started doing theater. And she was one of those people, she knew everything. Like, you give her a script, you give her a week, she knows the whole thing. And it drove me nuts, because I'm sitting here going, how do you do that? I can't, how are you doing that? She could say everybody's line, somebody was out, she'd just jump in, hey, okay, what am I doing? And she could recite the whole thing from memory. It drove me nuts. So proud of her, but drove me nuts, because I was like, how are you doing that? So yeah, we have a big family that likes to try different things, and like I said, everybody's done a little bit of theater. They may have moved on and done certain other things. Some brothers have played football, some have gone on to do Civil Air Patrol and other things. So, you know, we all try it because we like having things to do. It's fun.
Chris sells herself short because, granted, Alex was the phenomenal one with memorizing lines, but Chris was very close to that too. That's one reason I don't worry about her in this show. They both come in like at Fiddler on the Roof. They had small parts, and they'd fill in for anybody. And I don't mean with the book. I mean, they'd just get up and do it. So, you know.
And I can't remember what happened today. So.
And I had to tell you this. You know who he is. There's a guy named Dakari Chapman who's in New York now. He came in my office today, said, I got to see Keith while I'm in town. And he was in The King and I. Mm-hmm. And the reason I mention him, he did the play. He played Wilbur the Pig in Charlotte's Web with me. And Chris was in it. She was a goose. And I was worried because we're going to do this in front of 2,000 school children. And he was not ready. He knew everybody else's part. He could recite it, but he couldn't do his own. And I finally honed him in, and he did fine. It was great. But he's been in New York and came back, and he said, tell everybody hello.
Aww.
But he'd love to come back here to do a show at some point. So people do gravitate back to Hudson. That was good.
Keep that in mind.
I know, right?
Yeah. Gravitate back to Hudson. Well, I'm going to ask the ladies with us today, why should people come and see this show? Maddie, you can start.
So, Miracle Worker is really, it's an entertaining show, but it has a deeper meaning behind it. It shows you how capable people are of learning new things. And we sell ourselves short all the time how stressful life is. Well, you see these things that Helen was having to overcome, and she did it with such grace and dignity. And really, it just kind of takes you out of your own life for a second to look back and like, wow, it's really so much less complicated than it could be. But it's also lighthearted in the sense that you can get good entertainment from it. So,
Good.
Okay.
Maddie did so good at that. I mean, I agree with everything that Maddie said, but I also, like she said, it was entertaining, but it's also got a little bit, even though it's a pretty serious play, and it's touches some really serious things, it's also got some funny things in it. Like James, the brother, is very much a smart aleck to Annie, and his dad, and Kate Keller, and I mean, even some of the scenes in the play are just really, like, I didn't expect that, you know. I mean, we were practicing it the other day, and people who had shown up there were like, I mean, I had never seen that, and that was just like so out there. Like I never would have thought that, you know, that would have been in this play, because, you know, the first couple scenes of it, it's very kind of laid back. There are some parts they're like, whoa, but the first couple of scenes are pretty laid back, and then you get a little bit further into the play, and it just gets a little more exciting the more you get into it. So, yeah.
I think it's just hopeful, because there's nothing like seeing somebody who is going through probably the darkest thing you can imagine, and then coming out the other side and being so inspiring. But you have that in a lot of areas. Everybody in this show has their dark area that they're going through. With the parents, it's the fact that they cannot reach their child. They have no way of reaching her. They have only a way of placating her. For James, it's a feeling of being the inferior child, because how are you going to compete with the fact that your kid sister can do nothing for herself, essentially? For Annie, it's trying to overcome her dark past, deal with some southern, what's the word? Southern stubbornness, I guess we'll go with, and battling it with her own Irish, just bullheadedness that she's got coming in because of where she's from and the life she lived growing up. So you have all these characters that are going through their own dark place, and at the very end, there's just this one bit of light that comes in, and it seems to kind of brighten up the whole picture. It's not perfect, because you can tell by the end of the show there are things that they're going to have to work on. Because, yes, maybe she finally gets something, but there's a lot beyond that that you have to teach her. And then you have a new conflict of the fact that Kate doesn't like that Anne has come in and almost usurped her position with her child, because Kate was the most important thing in the world to Helen until Anne got to her. So you have this nice arc of things, but the center of it is that there's always a hope. Kate begins it with the hope that somebody can reach her child, and Annie carries it with the hope that, by golly, I'm going to reach this kid if it kills me. And then you have Helen, who finally, when she does understand something, can't get enough of it. And it's the hope of, oh my gosh, there's more out there for the world than me, than darkness and silence. So I think, like he said with Easter, it's a very important story because it reminds you of hope and the fact that you can have it even in the darkest moment of your life. And I think that's an important thing to see.
They're also very insightful. You see why I'm proud of them.
I can see that.
Yeah, but Sam touched on the humor element. There's one little thing in the show that I like, just a simple thing, but they're all trying to placate her a little bit. So first I think it's the servant brings her like a little piece of candy or cake, says, this won't hurt your supper. And then her dad comes in, well, here's something, and he gives her some sweets, and she just, and then her mom comes in and gives her some sweets. And when I equate that to when I did state fair, and we kept putting extra liquor into the mincemeat, and it won at the first prize at the fair. People didn't know the other person kept pouring it in. But it's just enough humor and lightness, especially through the character of James, but all of them, that it keeps it from getting, just morose. And it is very hopeful. Chris was right on the button with that.
Keith, remind us of all the pertinent details.
All righty. We're also going to sign the show 2 nights, one the first week and one the second week, if anybody in the deaf community does want to come. But they'll be cited, of course, to see the signing. It's Thursday through Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, March 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 28th, 29th, and 30th, ending the night before Easter. The meal's at 6:30 every night, catered by Dan'l Boone Inn. The show itself starts at 7:30. You can get tickets for the meal and the show for $37 for the show only, up in the balcony, which is a good place to sit and observe it all, for $19. And the tickets go on sale February the 6th. That's a Tuesday at 10 a.m. Three ways to get tickets. Call the Hub box office, and if someone's not in there, that you can leave a message, and Addie will follow up. The fine stage manager, she will follow up. She does a good job. Not stage manager, that's this young lady. The Hub manager, the Hub director is Addie. I'm so proud of Addie. She's going to do great. But anyway, call her, leave a message. 828-726-8871, or go by the Hub Station box office, 145 Cedar Valley Road, right where it's down the hall where the play will be presented in the auditorium, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 5. Or the best way, again, most convenient way, most efficient way, is to go online. You can go to the Hub Station box office or the town website, and follow the link to tix.com, tix.com, and get your tickets. I keep saying this, we build up great audiences, and we have good audiences at the Hub, but there's not a reason that most shows, and I'm sure this is going to be chief amongst them, there's not any reason in the world why they shouldn't be completely sold out and that we have to turn people away. I don't think a lot of people realize the quality that we present them, and they need to come one time to see that. It's not just not putting any other theater down. There's so many wonderful theaters that do so many wonderful things, but it's really a step beyond community theater. And people need to come see that with their own eyes and hear it with their own ears, because you're fortunate enough to hear and see. And that's the point I was going to make. We're having no music. You know how I'm so musical. No music in this show before, during, after, intermission, for the curtain call. Total silence to just go into the world that Helen had to experience. So.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank y'all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on stage at the Hub at the end of March.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.